In today's video, I'm going to cover how I created this 3D graphic that I have been using a lot this year in my work, kind of showing my Studio AAA logo in the mouth of a 3D character, which I then usually add some kind of 2D effects to, or some glitchy stuff to, depending on what I'm working on. My aim for this video is that I will show you how I actually created the graphic, like everything start to finish. If you use that to create your own graphic with your own logo or some text or whatever, you can use the other tutorials that I've got, or other tutorials just generally that cover 2D effects to get your own effect on it. I'll show some versions of my work using this render on screen now. These ones that I'll show on screen are effects that I've already covered on my channel. So if you want to dither this graphic or add like a CRT modulation effect to it or any kind of mixed media effect, I've covered a lot of that stuff already, so you can watch this one and then go watch one of the other videos. In this video, I will be using Adobe Illustrator, Daz 3D, which is a free software, and Blender 3D, which is a free software. I'm not an expert in Blender or Daz, and to be honest, I think you will benefit. If you're someone who's new to 3D, you'll benefit from some of what I show you today. So to get straight into it, I'm already in Adobe Illustrator now, and I've got my logo here. Now, I've got my logo as an SVG already. It's already a vector. You might not be working with a vector, and I'm going to show you now how to convert your PNG logo to a vector. Obviously, it's not recommended, but if your PNG is high quality enough, it kind of doesn't matter for this. So this is my SVG that I'm going to be working on, but if I come over here, I've already pulled in the PNG file. So with your PNG selected, just come up to Object, go to Image Trace and click Make and Expand. And once it spits something like this out, right click it, click on Ungroup, and then click off so you deselect, and then click somewhere on the background and then delete that, and you'll have fuck off with the AI promo. Yeah, you'll have the PNG. You can scale it up to see if it's super messy. If it is super messy when you do this, then probably best to get a vector. But I'm not going to use the PNG version because I have the original vector for my logo here. And what I'm going to do straight away is just change the color of this to 50% gray. That's personal preference for me, but this is just so when I import this into the 3D environment later, it will be easier to start setting up lighting and stuff on it, because if you import it black, then the lights won't really show up properly. You don't have to do that. But anyway, so what I like to do for my logo, because it's smooth and was kind of designed with this in mind, is add a inflation effect in Illustrator's 3D tool. So if you select your, I've just duplicated mine to back it up because I'm going to show you something else in a minute, but select your vector, come up to Effect, 3D Materials, and then go to Extrude and Bevel. For you, you might be thinking nothing happened, whereas I got a menu. So if you didn't get this menu pop up, come to Window and just make sure 3D and Materials is ticked. So if I untick that, it disappears. So that's maybe what happened to you if you've not used this before. But yeah, come up to Window, 3D Materials, and you'll get this little menu. Now, we don't need to worry about any of the like rotation or posing the logo in Illustrator because we're going to be doing that in Blender. First thing I do is just go to Inflate, tick Inflate both sides. I turn the depth down to 0 so that it just is like one inflation and another inflation. I'm just going to turn my light down because I'm getting a headache. And then if you want, like, you can mess with depth for your logo, or you don't have to inflate. You can just do an extrusion if you want. A lot of that stuff is easier to just do in Blender though. I inflate in Illustrator just because I just do inflate in Illustrator because inflating in Blender, you have to like set up like physics stuff and I can't bother doing that. So that's fine for me. I'm happy with that shape. So you can come down here and click Export 3D Object, but we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to put the 3D tab away now and go back to Window, and a little bit below 3D Materials, you'll have Asset Export. So click on that and you'll get this little window pop open. Select your 3D object now and drag it into this area here. I duplicated my SVG already because I'm going to show you how to extrude your logo in Blender as well, just in case you don't have Illustrator. I'm gonna pull my SVG into here as well. So we've got two assets now in our asset export. Click on asset 1, change the format to OBJ, and then click export. Browse wherever it is you want to save it on your computer. I'm already there for mine, and press select folder. I've got this little dialog that box asking me if I want to replace files, you will get that. I've already tested this, so yeah. Now again, with your other asset selected, so the SVG, which is asset 2 for me, change it from PNG to SVG, and you can add scales if you want. So if you want to export it for whatever reason at 50% scale or whatever, you can go and add more, but I don't need any of that stuff. So I'll just click export, same folder, and that's it, done. Just so you know why I said not to export with 3D materials tab, if I load that up now with the 3D selected now, so if I go to export 3D object, it just puts one in here. But if you don't have this open, it doesn't always like auto populate it like that. It doesn't always pop it up. So yeah, just if you follow this in the future and get to that point, just remember you need to sometimes open asset export. Anyway, done in Illustrator now. I'm going to minimize that, and we've got Blender already open. I'm in Blender 4.0, and this is just the default scene that loads up when you open Blender. Blender's free, so if you don't already have Blender, you can come get it from blender.org. There is Blender 4.1, but I've not upgraded to that just yet, and this shouldn't make a difference. You could, yeah, I think you could even be using like a 3-year-old one at this point. I'm not using anything advanced for this tutorial. Yeah, just download it and install. If you're experienced with 3D, you're probably not even watching this, but if you're experienced with 3D, just bear with me while I explain some of this stuff for people who might be new. So in this tutorial, when you see me navigating around this 3D scene, I have a mouse that lets me, like, I have a middle mouse button. So if you're on a trackpad, or if for whatever reason you can't press down your middle mouse button, then you'll notice as I move around here, this little graph here with the Z, X, and Y axis on it moves around. So if you want to do this too without using the middle mouse, you can just click on this sphere at the top right and just move your mouse around like that. To zoom in, I'm just scrolling forward. To zoom out, I'm scrolling back. If you want to do that, if you're on a trackpad or whatever and you can't do the pinching thing, there's a little magnifying glass here. You can just click on that and drag, and that will let you zoom in and out. And while I'm positioning things and moving things around, just bear in mind that the green arrow represents the y-axis, the red arrows or red controls represent the x-axis, and the blue controls or blue arrows represent the z-axis. So if I don't always like call them out, like if I might not remember to say which axis I'm editing, you can just have a look at which arrow that I am interacting with, and will make it a little bit easier for you. So before I import anything into Blender, I'm just going to quickly set up my project file, how I always like to have it set up, just to make things a little bit easier. So if you come to the bottom here and wait till your mouse sort of changes to the arrow, sort of if you hover over this black line here and right click to get this little menu pop up and click on vertical split, you can then choose where you want to split your viewport. So just click somewhere in the middle and you'll now have two instances of the same cube. They're not different. So look, if I move this one on the right, it'll move on the left. So you're editing the same stuff. What we're going to do though is use one of these to work in and one of them as our camera perspective. It's personal preference, but I like to use the right hand viewport as my camera perspective. Go ahead and click on this little camera icon here, or you can just press numpad 0 for that. And then on the right here, you'll see you've got this big list of icons. If you come up to the one that looks like a printer, if you hover over it, it'll say output. Click there and then just change your Y resolution to 1920 so that we've got a 1:1 aspect ratio for this. Then go one above to sort of like the back end of a camera. If you hover over this one, it'll say render. Make sure you're in Eevee. You can change your sampling if you want like higher quality, but if you're on a low RAM or like if you don't have a new GPU, I wouldn't recommend it for now. All we're going to do here is just tick bloom because we are going to need that for later. Then come out of this tab and look on the right hand side for this little arrow that sort of pokes out just near where the sphere is that I showed you earlier. It'll probably be right next to scene, collection and collection, but yeah, just click on this little arrow so you get the transform menu pop up and change the tab from item to view, and then come down here where it says lock and just tick the box that says camera to view. What this has essentially done is made it so while you are moving around the scene in this right hand viewport, you are also changing where the camera is. It also means that if we make changes to where the camera is by like text input or using the left viewport, the right hand viewport will sync up to that. That is just going to make your life easier for later on, so I would recommend doing it. So now if you select your camera in the left hand viewport and change back to item, you'll get this transform menu come up. So at this point, just change the X location to 0, Y location to 0, and Z location to 0. Then change your rotation, X to 0, Y to 0, and Z to 0. That's going to reset like all of your camera properties to default. At this point, I would recommend just doing File, Save As, and save this Blender project. If you're new to Blender, save this somewhere that you can use this as like a starting point. Most people who are experienced with 3D, like if you're really experienced, you probably don't need this template, but if you're new to learning 3D and you want to get into it, does help to have like a starting point like this so you don't have to remember all the setup stuff. So yeah, I would save that here. Once you've saved it, maybe make another copy just for this tutorial, and then just change the rotation X axis on your camera to 90, and then you can pull the green arrow out a little bit so the camera is just capturing the cube. And then working in your left hand viewport now, if you click on the cube and use that transform tab again to just lower the Y scale value to, you can literally put it at 0 if you want. It'll just change the cube to be a plane. Then on the left hand here, you'll notice there is the move tool, the rotate tool, and the scale tool. So if you switch to scale and then using this white ring that appears on the outskirts of the cube, you can scale this up as much as you want. You'll get a better sense of what you need to scale it to in a minute when we start importing things, but yeah, just scale it up and move it back as like a backdrop. Then the last little bit of setup we're going to do before we start importing things into Blender is on your left hand viewport, again, just bring your mouse down to the bottom, right click and do a horizontal split. Pull up, probably don't go halfway with it, just do like a third of the way. You'll get another viewport here. We're going to change the editor type using this icon at the top left of that viewport to the shader editor. Then if you zoom in, like just with your scroll wheel with the cube selected, just change the base color to 0, and that will, when we start rendering, the cube will now show up in black. If you want to see how your render stuff is going to show up, if you come back to your right viewport, mine's cropped here because I've made my window smaller for this recording, but you'll probably see some more circles here. If you can, where my mouse is now, if you just pull this menu over to the right now we're in like the clay or solid viewport shading, and if you change to the render engine viewport shading, you'll see now that the cube turns black. Again, if you're on a slower computer or if you don't have a lot of RAM, I would recommend doing all the work we're doing today in the solid shading, which is this one, and then change to that at the end, but I'm going to leave mine on the render engine shading for now. So at this point, you're ready to start importing your objects. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to import an OBJ file. Annoyingly, you have to use Blender's like file view thing. I'm exposing myself as being a Call of Duty player right now, but yeah, this file browser is annoying because it doesn't have all your pinned item things. If you just load up your default one, I've loaded up my default one like outside the recording now, you can copy a file path and then just paste the file path into this little text box here to navigate to your like wherever you saved. Illustrator will have created this file called obj, so open that and just open asset1.obj and click on import. Now for me, just because I'm going to be showing people how to do this with an SVG as well, I'm going to go File, Import, and I'm going to import a scalable vector graphic. I'm just going to import the SVG file that we used as well. So I'm going to show both here depending on what you ended up using. If you inflated or if you just want to use SVG, just bear with me while I explain both for sort of both sets of people. Starting with the obj file that I inflated, I'm just going to use the uniform like white line to scale my logo down. It doesn't really matter what you leave the logo scale at right now, but that's all you need to do for now. Then I'm going to just hide that so I can work on the other logo version. When you imported your SVG, it's very likely you couldn't see anything if you were as zoomed out as I am. So just scroll in and zoom and you'll see the logo in the middle. Now Blender adds your SVG as a curve object. Select the logo and then come back over here to the tab that you've probably got open for your render settings, and you're going to come down to data and open this little tab that says geometry. So come down to this tab that says geometry and you've got offset and extrude. So what you're going to want to do is turn up the extrude value just a little bit and then start scrolling out and scaling your logo up. I'll just pull this toward the middle a little bit. If you move your logo into the middle of the project and then right click it and click set origin and then click on origin to geometry, it will move the like center point to the center point of your logo, so you're just editing it a little bit easier. But yeah, you can extrude, like You can go really far if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend doing quite a small extrusion. So I'm going to go like 0.005. And then if you go down below geometry, you've got bevel. So you can add a little bevel to see. If you go too far, like it'll look silly. But yeah, you can start adding like some rounded edges. You can also click on profile and start adding some like contours to the bevel, just like you can in Photoshop. So you know, if you're experienced with Photoshop, when you're doing the bevel and emboss and there's the little curves value, this is kind of what you're editing. So if you wanted to have like something interesting on the front, you can mess around with this. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you quickly the material that you will be applying, and then we're going to move into Daz and generate our human asset. I'm going to apply mine on my inflated logo just because that's what I'm going to be working with. But whatever you're going to be working with, just click on the asset, and then in your shader editor, I'm just going to pull this up so this is a little bit bigger in the screen recording. Literally all I do is, it was a really simple material that I used for my version of the render. So you can do other stuff here. You can make it chrome if you want or whatever. But all I did was add some emission and then just changed the color to be like a warm light. Now in a minute that'll look more familiar when you see what we're going to do with the mouth around it. But yeah, like if you want to turn off emission and like turn on metallic and turn the roughness down and start, you know, doing like building up a chrome effect with some lights and stuff, like you can do that. But mine, you can edit the emission later, so I'm just going to leave mine at 23, which is probably a little bit much, but yeah, I'm going to edit that later on. So if you opted to use the SVG for your logo, at this point, once you've applied your geometry settings to it and like pose it where you want it in the render, with it selected, just come up to object, apply, and then click scale. And then in your shader editor, you won't have had anything appear here because it was just a curve object. So come up here where it says slot 1, it'll say SVG MAT, and just click on the minus. Then here it should change and you can just press new and you'll get your settings that I used before. So obviously mine looks ugly here and I didn't spend much time at all messing with the extrusion settings, so this will look bad. But if you spent some time, or if you did maybe a more simple one, it won't look so bad for you. And yeah, you can just apply the same effects that I did before. So just add a color, add some emission, or mess with the rest and create like a chrome effect. For me at this point, I'm gonna now delete my SVG because that's everything that you need to do so the logo covered. So I'm gonna turn my inflated logo back on. Just gonna sort of minimize my shader editor for now because we won't need that until later on in the video. And then at this point, I'm going to open up Daz 3D. Again, Daz is free, so it has lots of paid options, and we're only going to scratch the surface really of what you can use Daz for. We're going to be using the stock assets in Daz as well. So just come to Daz, click on download studio. Since I started using it, they have made it a little bit more complicated to download it. You got to download like an installer and stuff. So like if you've not already got this, just pause the video and go and download it and install it. When you open it up, this is what it'll look like. So very familiar. You've got the sort of navigation cube at the top right this time rather than a sphere. You don't really need to navigate around too much for what I'm going to show you here. On the left, click on smart content. Click on this little drop down that says figures, people. You can go male or female, it's up to you. I'm going to go male, and then I'm going to use Genesis 8, and then again figures, people, and you'll have these 3D humans pop up on the left. It's totally up to you what you want to use here, whether it's male or female like I said, but just make sure that you don't use the dev load because that will come without a skin texture. So I'm going to go Genesis 8.1 basic male, just double click that and it will load in this guy to your scene. He'll be like T-posing, but we don't need arms or legs or anything for this. So I'm just going to use this little magnifying glass here to start zooming. Let me just actually make sure I'm not going to zoom in on his crotch. But yeah, using these controls at the top right, you're just going to want to sort of find a point where you can see the face like clearly, and then click on the head. Bottom right here, you've got this editor tab. By the way, if you don't have any of the windows that I'm using here, they are all in window. So for example, the editor tab, if you go to window panes, it'll be like this one that says posing. So yeah, just make sure you have the posing window selected. Then with the head clicked, you'll notice rather than like having to, because Daz can be quite intimidating if you feel like you've got to edit it all with just these stupid arrows and like sort of somehow pose things like just with your mouse. But everything has a slider, so you can just do it all with sliders basically. I just need to undo a couple of times. Let me just reset that because I messed with his neck position. But yeah, so on this menu, we don't really care about the neck and where that's going. So click up to head. And then even though we're only using the mouth, I'm going to start with the eyebrow. It might not be like super obvious, but I wanted the guy's face to be like scrunched up a little bit, just so that when I applied the dithering, there was more shape to it, because you can see that the cheekbones and stuff, it's all quite flat and like detailless here. I turned the brow down all the way up to 100% and then turned the brow outer up to 100%, so he's kind of like frowning a little bit like this. Cheek puff you can turn up or down, like it's up to you. You'll get that this is a lot of personal preference here. First one you need to do is jaw open all the way, so he opens his mouth. You can then turn up angry all the way if you want it to like, you know, like contribute. You'll see the nose moves when you turn up angry, the eyes are squinting a little bit. Or you can, I don't know, I guess if you want to do flirting or afraid, these are all a little bit weird. But yeah, I would recommend just turning angry all the way up. Just gonna zoom in a little bit more on the mouth now. Keep scrolling, you'll see there's a slider for absolutely everything. You can turn up these mouth dimple sliders to sort of have the edges of the mouth open a little bit more. We've got mouth frown, which sort of changes the posing of the lips. Mouth pucker. We don't need any mouth pucker. Mouth smile, again, if you want to like really pull the sort of corners of the mouth outwards. I'm not going to do that for mine though. You can have the tongue posed outwards using these tongue sliders. I wouldn't recommend it, but yeah, like there's a lot you can do here to make this your own, so you don't just have the same sort of render as me. Yeah, there's lots of weird stuff here. Nasal flare, nose sneer, got some like vowel sounds for the mouth. Ultimately, you should just go through these until you're happy with it. As I said before, you don't need to edit any of the rest of the pose here, but like if you wanted to, you can, like you could put like I'm not the best, and you should use the sliders for it, but yeah, if you click on the arm, you'll get the arm sliders pop up, and you could put the hands on the face, or you know, like you could do whatever really. I'm not gonna do that for this one though, because I would like this tutorial to not be 5 hours long. But basically whatever you click on, the sliders will sync up to that. So when I click on the arm, you'll see I've got this little bend one. You can change the rotation, twist, all that stuff. Let me just put the arm back away a little bit. Yeah, if you click on like the chest, you can sort of change how he's looking. But yeah, I'm happy with that. This is all I need for mine. Once you're happy with yours, go to File, Export, navigate to wherever you want to save. I'm just going to name mine Guy Mouth. Open and press enter. Now you'll get this little settings window pop up. There are lots of recommendations for how you should export the human, the Genesis human from Blender, but for this just use the defaults. I followed some other export settings and it messes with the skin texture, so yeah, just go with the default for this one and click accept. It'll take a second to just generate all the assets, and if you want to, you can save the scene, just save the scene like wherever, and then you've got the guy backed up and you can come and sort of mess with him even more if you want to. But yeah, that's it for Daz for me. So I'm going to exit the Daz software now and come back to Blender. So again, I'm going to go to File, Import, and we just saved as an OBJ file. So I'm going to go to Wavefront Object, navigate to wherever you saved and click on the OBJ file and then click Import, and the guy will spawn in. So you might be inclined now to just scale up and like do it all by hand, like manually, but you can just come back to this little transform window here. So with the guy selected, you can just start inputting like some numbers here. 20 might be a bit much, but then just move the location, Z axis all the way down. 20 actually wasn't enough, so I'm gonna go 80x, 80y, 80z, and then change the z-axis down again, and then yeah, just position until the logo's in the mouth. That's worked out like quite quickly for me, but for you it might not. So if you turned your emission up all the way like I did, you'll see that the logo now is just the only thing you can see when you go into viewport shading set to the actual render. So if you didn't delete it at the start, you'll still have this light here, but I'm going to delete it just to show you how to import it yourself. So I would recommend doing all of this on the left hand viewport that you created, where everything is just sort of in clay mode. So come up to the top, click on add, and then click on light. And I'm just going to add a point light because it's nice and simple. It'll spawn right in the middle, but just pull it out using the Y-axis lever and move it up a little bit as well. Then on your left here, if you click on the little data light bulb, you've got this option for power. So if you turn up the power of the light, you can start properly lighting the face. Now I would say that you should probably have the light be sort of emitting more light than the logo. So if you come back to your logo now and turn the emission strength down to something like a bit less overpowering, you can start to like balance out sort of how you want the lighting to be. So then once you've got the point light sort of established wherever you want it, you can come back to add light, and you can add an area light. Again, pull that out of the mouth. You can rotate so that the line is like facing your human, and pull it up, move it around, change the power again. So I'm just going to add like something quite soft for mine and move it away a little bit as well. Probably just going to move my logo up a little bit too. So if you just select your logo and use the blue arrow to do that, if you need to do that as well. In your left hand viewport where the render is just still showing clay, if you click on the X axis at the top right, you'll move to side view. So you can see here that my logo is actually clipping with the cheek of the character. So I'm just going to pull it out so it's below the teeth. And then as well, if I come to scale here, I can scale up slightly. Probably don't want to go too far because then I'll be out of the camera perspective. But if you want to get it really close to the teeth and the cheeks and stuff, you can use the side view to do that, or front view to align it. And yeah, you can sort of fine tune it as much as you like. If you want your logo to be all the way out of the mouth and like bigger than the face, you might just need to move your camera back a little bit. So you can just select the camera and pull that out. And as I said before, at this point, you have a better idea of the scale that you need on the pane we created earlier. So, you know, you might need to just up the scale of that in the background. So at this point, I'm gonna start messing with some of the settings for the camera. So if you're not familiar with terms like focal length or wide angle, basically all I'm going to do to make this scene look, or just to make the angle of the face look a little bit more harsh, is I'm going to use a wide angle lens. So if you've got any new phone, you've probably, like, when you go into the camera, so this is an iPhone, it's not the newest one, but you'll be able to see here, this is me with the normal lens selected, and then if I change it to 0.5, this is a wide angle lens, so you'll see it gets more of my room. If I take it like really close to my face like this, my face stops being like flat and normal like you can see on this camera, and like it's much more distorted, and yeah, I just look insane on this one. I don't know if that comes up very well, but yeah, you probably hate taking photos of yourself on the wide angle because it's gonna pull the sort of sticky outy bits of your face, like your lips or your cheekbones or your nose, forward, and then your ears and like your hairline and like your jawline and stuff is distorted backwards, and it yeah, it looks weird. I'm going to use this in this for this render to just make it look a little bit more dramatic, and for when we're editing this in Photoshop later on, if you add a dither effect to it, or if you apply a texture to it, or if you do anything that's going to mess with the luminance of the image, you've got more to work with, like shadows wise and shape wise as well. So yeah, to do that, select your camera and come to the data tab here, just a little green camera icon, and change the focal length. So if you pull it all the way down, it'll be really wide angle, so you'll have to zoom in again. So you can see here, like, this is a stupidly wide angle, but this is kind of a more exaggerated one than what I just showed you on my phone. 5mm is probably way too wide, but I just wanted to show you that. Well, no, it's not probably, it's definitely way too wide. I just wanted to show you that just because you get like an understanding of what we're doing. So yeah, I'm just going to keep messing with it. I'm going to try 18 millimeters. What this will also depend on, and one of the reasons you won't just be able to copy my focal length is it'll depend on the scale that you went for. So if you blew your human and your logo up way further than me, the focal length that you're going to need to get a nice wide angle is going to be different. So yeah, just bear that in mind. I think, to be honest, it might have already been set at 20 millimeters a minute ago, but I'm going to try 30. And what I'm also going to do is just rotate the camera a little bit so it's sort of pointing upward. And then if I move it down on the Z axis, just so we've got the bottom of the jawline, and I just need to make sure I don't get those eyelashes in. So if I pull the focal length to 35, zoom out a little bit, and then just continue tweaking like the rotation and the angle until I'm happy with it. If you want some help at this point, you can select your camera, come back down to the data tab, and in safe areas you can like set up some guides using this this slider here. So if you wanted a line right down the middle to make sure, you know, things line up properly, you can do that. So mine actually does. You can do the same with the y-axis as well. But yeah, for you, it's going to depend, like, even on whether you went for male or female for the model, because the face shape will be different and what kind of logo you're working with, stuff like that. So just keep tweaking it till you're happy with it. For me, I'm honestly happy with this. Like, I'm fine using this for mine. Probably just going to turn up the point light a little bit more, and I'm just going to tint my emission a little bit more as well, so a little bit further into the orange for my emission. So yeah, once you're happy with yours, make sure you save some kind of backup, then come up to render and click on render image, or you can go F12. Now at this point, like, again, it's going to depend on what kind of computer you're working on. I imagine mine's just going to render instantly. Yeah, it has. If yours doesn't render instantly, it could be because you turned up the render samples. So I've left mine at 64, but if you turn it down, it'll render quicker. If you want a better quality, you can turn it up. Now, because I'm not like an expert on 3D, I'm not sure like how far to go with it, but yeah, like 256 probably going to take just a few seconds longer for mine, but it's like a slightly better quality. Yeah, once you get a render you're happy with, image, save as, and save it where you saved the rest of your assets for this. And then the last thing I did to mine when I use this in my work, if I just exit that render and open up Photoshop, just pull in my render. Yeah, the last thing that I did to mine, if you just select your render in Photoshop, go to filter and liquify. Now I'm aware that you can do this in Blender if you want, but because I was dithering mine, I was just messing around with it before I dithered. Yeah, all I did was just liquefied the teeth into fangs. All I'm doing here is just clicking on the top of the tooth, moving my cursor to just below the tooth, holding shift and clicking sort of thereabouts, and it'll pull the teeth down in a straight line. I've got my brush set to 100 pressure, 20 density, and size of 90, but your size will differ, and then just press OK. So like I said, from this point, like, you can start applying effects that I've covered on my channel, or, you know, effects that you're familiar with, effects from other tutorials, or you can just use it as it is if you want to, and use it as an asset in your work. I'm just testing something out on it right now. Yeah, a couple people asked for this, so I thought I may as well make a video on it, since it's pretty simple. So yeah, this effect probably not the best for this type of render, but if you wanted to go and dither it, you can get something a little bit nicer out of it with dithering. I've covered all these effects I'm messing with now in other videos on the channel, but yeah, hopefully this was useful for you. This is probably the only Blender tutorial that I could be asked for that I could do. I use Blender a lot to create assets like this for my work. I don't really use Blender for, you won't really see me post something that started and finished in Blender. Like, you will see me using Blender just to create assets for this type of work. With this one, like, for example, you can see that the shadow on the nose is a bit too much, so like, yeah, I would probably just go and move around the lights a little bit to create some like nicer shadows that don't just sort of like this nostril that look like a ghoul from Fallout, if you've seen Fallout. But yeah, I would maybe just move things around a little bit like that. But yeah, it's up to you, obviously, because we've created the assets and saved all the project files. Like, everything is editable down to replacing the logo or changing the human around around, or changing the lighting in Blender, or yeah, anything you want really. So that's that for this video. I will link or show on screen on the end card thing some tutorials you can now go watch of mine and use this asset in that you've created. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.